John, John chapter 6, and Deuteronomy 32. John 6 and Deuteronomy 32. This is a Father's Day message. It's rare that I ever do that on time. Our title is The Father's Nest. We'll begin in John 6, drop down to verse 5. It says, when Jesus lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him, he said unto Philip, whence shall we buy bread for these that they may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, he wasn't even addressed, but he's got a pipe up. Andrew, Simon's brother. It sounds like something Simon would, it must be a family trait. Simon's brother, Simon Peter's brother, said unto him, there is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. It'd have been great if he stopped right there. We would have been fooled into thinking he had some faith. But he continues, but what are they among so many? And Jesus said, make the men sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he'd given thanks, he distributed to the disciples, and the disciples to them that were set down. And likewise of the fishes as much as they would. When they were filled, he said unto his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, and filled 12 baskets with fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the miracles that Jesus did, said, of a truth, that prophet, I missed a word, said, this is of a truth that prophet that should come into the world. Now, there's just one little thing I want to capture here. Verse 14 begins with, and those men, what men? He just referred to people picking up 12 baskets of fragments. But the story, overall, the story is about 5,000 people being fed. Who's those men? I think it's every man there, both the 5,000 and the 12. Now we'll get our companion text. That's going to be in Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32, verse 9. He says, for the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. He founded him in a desert land, and in a waste howling wilderness. He led him about, he instructed him, he kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirreth up her nest, fluttereth over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them, beareth them on her wings. So the Lord alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. He made him to ride on the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields. He made him to suck honey out of the rock, and oil out of the flinty rock, butter of kine and milk of sheep with fat of lambs, and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats with the fat of the kidneys of wheat, and thou didst drink the pure blood of the grape. There's a lot of illustrations in the Bible and analogies of God. That's the purpose of the Bible, is so that you can get to know God. And so we get a bunch of these illustrations. Sometimes you'll hear him referred to as a shepherd, a king, a redeemer, a rock, and the list goes on and on. But one of the most vivid pictures is this, God as a father. When Moses here in our passage is nearing the end of his life, he looks back over the 40 years that God's been dealing with his people. And this is Holy Spirit inspired. He doesn't compare God to a mighty general. That's probably what we would have done. He doesn't compare him to somebody who's supplying the nation with food, although he did. He supplied them with food and water and kept their shoes from dying out, and all those things. What he does compare him to is an eagle raising her young. So this must be something we need to know about. He says, so the Lord. Okay, that's what begins it. That's why we triggered our analogy. You understand an eagle, then you'll understand the Lord. The eagle is the window through which we can see the Father's heart. The baby eaglet is in the nest. And I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I'm going to call it an eaglet. And so the eaglet is there in the nest, and he's loving that nest, and he's right at home. And the mama bird has done everything to prepare for the little chick. She's gone out, she worked hard to build that nest, and they plucked their feathers and lined the nest so it's nice and comfortable. And as far as that little eaglet is concerned, that's his world, and he ain't leaving. Little does he know. His protection is constant. The nest is all he's ever known. And as far as he's concerned, it's all he wants to know. Think of it. He doesn't need to go out and get in a food line. Mom's going to bring it to the door. That was DoorDash before it existed. But the problem is the nest can never fulfill his purpose. He wasn't created to sit in safety in a nest. He's created to soar. And our passage in Deuteronomy, he says there that he's going to eat of the fields. That is, he's got to be up high enough to see the fields. He's going to prey on animals, is what he was talking about. So he's got to get up past the human level of the earth, and he's got to fly to do that. One day, the mother begins to do something that seems a little strange to him. She begins stirring up the nest. That's what our verse said. She stirs. The comfortable feathers that they're used to are starting to get disturbed. The quiet routine is interrupted. Eventually, she's going to hover over this young eaglet, and she's going to kick him out of the nest. If the little eaglet could speak, he'd probably be saying, "Why are you running me out of the house?" That's all he's known. And as far as he's concerned, Mama has not talked to him and explained this to him. No, it's just he wakes up one day and he's getting kicked out. She's become intentional, not cruel. If Mama just had her way, she would just let him stay there forever. But that's going to be to the detriment of everybody. So she has to kick him out so he can grow and he can learn on his own. And it's with intention she kicks him out. It's obviously the instinct of the Lord built in there. She's going to prepare the young eaglet. By preparing it, she's teaching it how it has to go gather and do the things that she's been doing. The best way to learn that is no preparation, kick out of the nest, sink or swim, sink or fly. That's how God works. Many Christians spend their lives asking God to make the nest comfortable. That's our main concern as humans usually is comfort. And so when we get a little comfort, the second he starts to stir our nest a little bit, we start crying out, "No, no, no, fix the nest again. You need to pluck out some more of those feathers. I'm not comfortable here." Maybe he's getting you ready to fly. The Heavenly Father, in our story here as the eagle, didn't create us to be comfortable. He created us to be conformed to his Son. Just as the little eaglet is going to have to learn to do the very thing Mama was doing for him. Now, the way he's going to learn it, it's going to be dramatic, to say the least. He's going to need to book a double session with his therapist. He's getting booted from the nest, and he's going to learn in a hurry. The Father's always doing two things for us at once. He's meeting our needs on a day-to-day basis. At the same time, he's preparing us for tomorrow's maturity. The way that you're prepared for maturity is not something you want. Otherwise, you would have already been mature. Something has to drastically happen to suddenly mature you. For Solomon, what had to happen was his dad die. Now, fortunately, God gave him a warning. David walks in there and tells Solomon, "I'm leaving. I'm going the way of all the flesh. You better man up." And that's the way it happened. This is really the same story we find all through the Bible. The examples are so many, I couldn't cover them all. But I paired this with John chapter 6 because it's the same thing that happens. In that chapter, the chapter's not about bread and it's not about a miracle, although it contains both. When John is talking and giving us this story, he tells us why he asked Philip about the feeding of the multitude. He did it to prove him. There was really no need for him to do that because it said he knew what he was going to do. It's almost like he's setting him up. Our text says in John, this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Everything in this chapter is going to revolve around that one sentence. This was all a demonstration for God to prove something. Now, what's he going to prove? Jesus already knew everything. It was Philip that didn't. The Father already knew. The children had to learn. This has always been the Father's way. He knows what we need. He knows what we actually trust. And he knows what we could become. He knew Philip was going to default to what we default to. Money. We ain't got none. They ain't getting no food. Our lives are the journey of discovering what the Father already knows. He's proving us. He's going to prove how we've been studying him. That was the great line that Hagar says. Hagar says, "Thou God seest me, have I here looked after him that seeth me?" That is, she's come to the realization God's been looking after her and she ain't been looking at him at all. That's what he's bringing out to this. Before the eagle ever stirred her nest, she built it. The eaglet didn't know that. He just came out and it was already built. Before she ever taught the young to fly, she fed them every day. What a provider. I'll give you some cross references. We're not going to turn there, but if you look at Psalm 103, verse 5 and Revelation 12:14, you find Jesus is the provider, just as an eagle provides for its young. God is always proving himself to his children. It seems like at first it's miraculous, it's simple, it costs nothing, it's easy, and then it's not so easy. When you find yourself falling out of the nest, easy ain't what you're thinking. And that's the way God raises his children. He starts with provisions, and after you get saved, it seems like you see his hand in everything, and miraculous things happen, and it's just great. And then it seems like not long after, he's pulled back from it. And if you're not careful, you'll just freeze in place. That brings us to our great first point. It's this: the Father provides because he's good. Don't lose sight of the fact that God is good. Amen. I know the charismatics have a little saying that they always say, God's good all the time. And, they chant that as a mantra. Now, it's true, very true. However, they go a little overboard. One of the great mistakes a Christian can make is believing that God enjoys testing and trying his people. Now, he does it. I don't think that's necessarily his joy in life. He delights in caring for his children. Provisions always come before the testing, before the proving. God seems like he's handing out to us nonstop, and we start thinking because we got something, we deserved it. We didn't do anything. The eaglet did nothing to get a meal. The eaglet did nothing to get comfort, and she did nothing to build a nest. It was just there. As soon as you get saved, it seems like you get a whole lot all at once. Christ had already planned the provisions in our passage in John 6, and he knew what he was going to do, and he wasn't worried a bit about it. Now, it's easy if you've already got the facts when you face a problem. If we look back over our life, and you can find the times that you were just worried sick. Now, it always worked out, didn't it? God always came through. Had you known what God was going to do, you wouldn't have been worried sick. However, when you don't, you start defaulting to something and it proves what you're relying on. Jesus wasn't worried. His disciples were worried. Jesus was not uncertain. Philip and Andrew were. The crowd was looking for bread. They're hungry. Jesus wasn't so interested in bread as he was training. He's going to take the opportunity to teach some boys something they never would have learned another way. So he has to present a problem. A problem is a great opportunity to learn something. It's difficult to realize that. Don't confuse the Father's calm with an absence of concern. Sometimes when problems show up, we ask God for what we've imagined the solution is. And it seems like it's quiet. He's calm. He's waiting for you to find him. He's the answer. Here in the passage, the answer was not really the boy's lump. Andrew understood that. What's one little boy's lunch in comparison to this crowd? That's true. So it's not the lunch that matters, it's Jesus Christ that matters. And that's the same for us. Long before Israel hungered in the wilderness, God had already prepared manna. It was already waiting for them. He didn't wait till they got in the wilderness and start baking. He'd been doing that all along. Exodus 16. Exodus 16, verse 4. I don't know if you ever made bread, but Toby's made some bread with a bread maker. My mom used to make it every now and then. Bread takes a while to make, all afternoon. And then you knead it, and my mom did ground her own berries and stuff. And it's a lot of work. But bread just doesn't just happen overnight. Exodus 16:4. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them, whether they will walk in my law or no. Now it sounds tough at the end, but that's not the way it began. You see how it began? I will rain bread. He's declaring something. God didn't say, I'll try to. We'll see about me giving you some food, or maybe I could. If y'all really beg me hard enough, then no, he just says, I'm going to do it. He speaks with certainty because he already knows what they're going to face when they get there. There ain't going to be no 7s, 11s, or Walmarts. Moses later reminds Israel why God allowed them to hunger. They go into that wilderness and they're hungry. That's of all the places for God to send them. Now, I know they've been to Egypt, or they've been from Egypt into Canaan before. That's a normal trade route, but not the way they went. The normal trade route is an 11-day journey from Goshen straight across to Beersheba. Could have done it. And in their mind, they're all leaving, and that's what they're thinking. Hey, we packed up a few things, and it's not going to be long. We're going to be there. It's a trade route. We can stop in and get something from wherever. But that's not what God did. I said, no, y'all going to get hungry. Deuteronomy 8, verse 2. And thou shalt remember all the way which the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee. Okay, that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 1, it seems like every time God's going to teach us something, is humble. If you're not humble when he's given you something, he'll humble you after. But humility is going to be part of the formula. He says, to prove thee, to know what was in thine heart. Now, God already knows what's in their heart. It's going to suddenly be apparent to them what's in their heart, whether thou wouldest keep his commandment or no. And he humbled thee and suffered thee to hunger, and fed thee with manna, which thou knewest not, neither did thy fathers know, that he might make thee to know that man doth not live by bread only, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of the Lord doth man live. Now, he's connected something right there. We understand the manna was literal bread, and they were literally eating it. And that's how they stayed alive. But he suddenly flipped the script and said, it's the words of God that make you live. Now, that's important. God allowed them to hunger, then he supplied bread. The hunger was not evidence of neglect. The children and families would be out there hauling him off to court. This hunger was the table on which God was going to display his goodness. It made it stand out. He had already told Moses, I'm going to rain bread from heaven. Well, if they didn't need it and it started raining bread from heaven, they wouldn't appreciate it. So he lets them get hungry. And then he does just what he said he was going to do. He starts raining bread. And now there's a thankfulness that goes with that. Abraham learns the same lesson. When Isaac looked around on Mount Moriah, all he could see was something missing. No, it wasn't missing. It was him. He looks around and he says, behold the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? That's the problem with being smart. I guess that's where the first mirror come up. He says, here, let me show him to you. No, Abraham answers with one of these great statements that you find in the Bible. Abraham says, my son, God will, there's that will again, provide himself a lamb for burnt offering. So Isaac saw there was a need there, and he didn't want it to be him, but that's the way it was going. Abraham, when he is confronted with the big question, he says, it's not about what we're seeing, it's about God. That's always the answer. When it doesn't feel like it, it feels like, no, I'm dealing with reality. Well, I think that was pretty real. A knife in Abraham's hand and an altar just built. You can't get more reality than that. And his answer is a spiritual answer. Most Christians would have told Abraham, you need to get in the real world. There's a little saying that says, don't be so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. That's baloney. It's the reverse. Unless you're heavenly minded, you won't be any earthly good. Mm-hmm. Later, Abraham names that very place Jehovah Jireh. That means the Lord will provide. And he did. Not that Abraham understood everything at the time, but he did understand enough to know the answer is always God. David reaches the same conclusion after a lifetime. He lived in caves and slept in fields and buried his friends and fled from Saul. Talk about a rough life. If you just read now, David is an exciting place to get to in your Bible because of all the stories and very dramatic. However, if we were living it, we wouldn't feel it was so exciting. When David summarizes his confidence in God, he doesn't begin by describing his enemies being destroyed. He describes God as a shepherd. In Psalm 23, he says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That is, I've commanded myself, quit wanting. David didn't say he never wanted anything, but he's saying, I'm commanding myself, no more wanting. God's the shepherd. I'll get everything I need. The shepherd's presence became greater than the sheep's circumstance. That valley didn't go away. Even though he had the greatest shepherd ever known or unknown to man, the valley's still there. And he's still making it walk through it. Guess what? The enemies are still there in the same chapter. He said he prepares that table in the presence of my enemies. We'd have thought, now, if he's a good father, he's going to get him away from those. No, that's not the answer. The answer is always a deeper dependence on God. And whatever will do that for you, he'll be willing to do. Matthew 6. Jesus teaches the same thing. Matthew 6, verse 31. This might not, I don't know how long. We'll probably cut this off when I can't talk anymore because this is 50 pages and we're on page 18. No. Jesus teaches it this way. Matthew 6, verse 31. He says, therefore, take no thought, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or wherewithal shall we be clothed? For all these things do the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of all these things. He's telling them you have a Father. And the Father knows what you need, therefore you don't have to worry about what you need. That in and of itself is saying God's going to provide. He didn't say you're going to have to grow up and learn how to do it all on your own. No, he says you've got a Father. If you've got a Father, you've got an answer. Your heavenly Father knoweth. Our Father knows. If you're saved, you've got a Father that knows. That's the same thing John told us in John 6. He knew what he was going to do. The application is this. Many Christians spend a lifetime studying their problems instead of studying the Father. What they've done is they've spent their energy on something that's not going to give them the answer and ignoring the very answer, Jesus Christ. You don't have to know specifically how he's going to do it, but you know he's going to. We count the loaves and we calculate money. We measure the crowd and we estimate the obstacles and, how 5 loaves and 2 fishes ain't going to quite make it. We can do that much math. However, arithmetic seems to be our first inclination to jump in on. I can add 2 plus 2. I can't do more than that, but 2 plus 2 I can add. Christ wasn't wanting math. He wanted faith. We respond the same way a lot of times. When the doctor calls, when the bank account bleeds red, we default to mathematical logic. But the Father's asking us to count something entirely different. Count on His faithfulness, His promises, His mercies. Count His history. You can look back in your life and see He's always taken good care of you. The times He's already proven Himself should be sufficient. Every trial, we decide whether we're going to trust the numbers or the Father. The nest is a gift. Before we ever speak about that stirring of the nest, we've got to appreciate the nest itself. The nest represents every provision God's already given us. If we were today sit down and start counting all the things God's done for us, you wouldn't finish. By the time you got to everything that you could write, you'd suddenly start remembering more. And it's never ending. That's the nest. James 1, verse 17. James says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father, there it is again, of lights, with whom is no variables, neither shadow of turning. Once again, it's that analogy to the Father. Everything good begins with Him. The eagle first carefully built that nest. She lined it with her feathers. She went out and did all the hunting for food, fed those little eaglets. They didn't do anything. That's our God. Many times we can't do anything. Those little eaglets, had she took off and said, y'all figure it out, they wouldn't have. They'd have died right there. That's the goodness of God. When you can't do anything and you're a baby Christian, He comes in and He does all kinds of things for you. But there comes a day, He says, you're no longer a baby. Well, let's see, I'm going to try to skip some of this so we can finish in a couple of weeks. The father enjoys providing for his children, and every father does. But no father wants his children to remain an infant forever. That'd be bad news. There comes a day when every father realizes that providing is not enough. Now he's got to begin preparing. That is, one day you got to do this all on your own. The eagle understands that day. The nest that once protected her young can eventually become the very thing that limits them unless she's prepared them. If she loves them, then she's going to kick them out so they can learn to grow up. She's eventually going to disturb that comfort. She's going to make them more likely to get close to the edge where they'll be less work to kick them out. She's going to start making it less comfortable because guess what? Their life's not going to be comfortable. Now, God mentioned in our passage in Deuteronomy all of the blessings they're going to get. He didn't tell you how they're going to get it. They're going to have to go hunt for it. They're going to be flying endless hours up there. And so that's what Mama's doing. She's preparing them for life. A stirred nest is not evidence of absence of the Father. It's evidence of a wise Father. That brings us to our second point. This will probably be where we have to end it. The Father proves over and over. He's going to prove us. He does that because He's wise and we're not. His proving was demonstrated in chapter 6 of John. He was the one that was smart. He was the wise. He was the miracle worker. None of the boys knew any of that. John 6, verse 5, he says this, when Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a great company coming to him, he saith unto Philip, whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? That's an entrapment. He's already fed him something that he expects him to answer with. Buy it and bread. Well, they're not going to buy anything. And he knows that. If point 1 we've already discussed was God's goodness, then this point 2 is going to be God's wisdom as a father. Every good father eventually discovers that providing for his children is only half his responsibility. He's got to also prepare them. There comes a day when the father realizes that if he continues to do everything for his children, he actually hinders the growth. They say of a chicken, I don't know if it's true or not, that if that little chicken and the egg, if it doesn't bust its way out, it's deformed when it comes out if you help it get out. It doesn't have strength. It's not built up the necessary muscles to bust free, then it won't live on its own. And that's what's going on here. Is God's trying to start developing some spiritual muscles. The child who's never challenged never matures. The child who's never allowed to struggle never develops strength. The father understands this. So he builds the nest and begins to stir it. That's the analogy he gave us in Deuteronomy. Moses didn't say that the eagle destroyed the nest. She's not being cruel and destructive. Otherwise, she'd have just blown the whole thing to smithereens and said, y'all fend for yourself. She's kicked them out. That's true. But it was done on purpose, and it was done with organization, and she knew what she was doing. The eagle stirred the nest. The nest is still going to remain. The protection also remained. She's stirring that nest, but she's still in the nest. She didn't leave. If she just wanted them uncomfortable, she could have tore that nest up and left. That's what God does with us. Sometimes when the comfort starts to disappear, you can count on it, he's still there. Matter of fact, if we start looking at the analogy, the eagle is closer to the eaglets when she's stirring the nest, probably than at any other time. So when our comfort starts to disappear, God's even closer than we thought before, although it might not feel comfortable. The Father's question, Jesus doesn't ask some things. He doesn't ask, Philip, do you believe I'm the Son of God? Now, we would think that'd be a good spiritual thing for Jesus to ask. That's not what he asked. He didn't ask, Philip, have you been faithful? I mean, that'd be pretty convicting, but he didn't ask that. He's more of a Bible believer than we are. He asked something just very ordinary, just a simple question. When shall we buy bread? Why did he ask such a simple, benign question? Because he understands the small foxes spoil the vine. And a simple question often exposes great truths or the lack thereof. So he asks something simple. It's usually when you stub your finger that you find out what's in your heart because it comes flying out of your mouth. Those simple things. It doesn't take much to bring a man to his knees. Just let a thorn get under his fingernail. That hurts. It's a little thing. We often, as parents, often ask kids things that we already know the answer to. Who left this door open? We know. We watched them do it. Who left that van door open? I don't know. Did you finish your homework? Why did you do that? You remember Adonijah had a problem. God identifies that in, where's that, First, Second Kings? He says that David had never said, displeased him in saying, why hast thou done this? David should have been a little harder on him. He wasn't preparing him. That's the father's job. But you can count on it. God's going to do his job. He's a real father. Because we lack understanding, John immediately removes any doubt. I like this. The Bible explains what you're supposed to take away from the Bible. He told us plainly. Jesus knew what he was going to do, and he was proving Philip. Now, he wants Philip to learn something about Philip, about himself. So he asks him something he knows he's already been concerned about himself. You're asking me to go buy it? I ain't got no money. That's the response. We've been there. The test is never for Christ's information. He doesn't need any. The test is for Philip's transformation. He needs to change the way he's been thinking. There's three great truths every Christian has to learn. The Father knew what Philip needed. The Father knew what Philip was already trusting. And the Father knew what Philip could become. Matter of fact, all 12 of those men, what they're going to become is something that turns the world upside down. They go from not knowing how to feed people and come up with money for it to suddenly they're the ones turning the world upside down, doing it from a prison cell. In Romans 8:28, the verse we all know, he says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to his purpose. Paul didn't say that all things are good. They sure don't feel like it a lot of times. But whatever it is, when that nest starts getting stirred and comfort starts dropping out, that in and of itself, we can say, oh, God's doing something. It's going to work out for good eventually. Now, with some of the discomforting things that have happened in all of our lives, we can look back and we can say, it has to be an all-wise God that can make that come out for good. And he does. He's trying to point everyone to himself, especially his children. Philip's arithmetic. John records Philip's answer. Philip answered him, 200 pennyworths of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. Philip immediately starts calculating. He's counting that crowd. He knows how much bread costs. He's been to the store. Everything he says is mathematically correct. But that's not what God wanted to hear. Spiritually. Now, Jesus didn't say this to him, but he could have. Spiritually, his math wasn't mathing, because the 5,000 are going to get fed. There's nothing sinful about arithmetic if it's small numbers. The problem is Philip counted everything except for the one thing that counts, the miracle worker right in front of him. He was really asking him, are you counting on me? Can I meet any need we see? And Philip hadn't come up with the right answer for that one. In Proverbs, he says this, trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. God's not against understanding. He's against leaning on understanding. We start exalting how wise and smart we are, and God yanks it right out from under us, because he wants to be seen as the only wise God, not your wisdom. In America, they've elevated education as though it's the end all be all. It's not. It's God. Faith is refusing to make your reason your foundation. A lot of times we say, well, I've seen this and I've seen that, and 2 and 2 is always equal to 4. No. Well, God can do math we hadn't seen before. Faith's refusing the math that's not adding up to equal Jesus Christ. Philip was leaning on numbers, and God corrects that in a hurry. The Father reveals what we trust. That's to reveal to us, not to him. He already knew it. But it's revealed to Philip. Now Philip understands, this is what I've been doing and thinking wrong. He's revealing what we call confidence. Confidence is what you're really trusting in. Now, most people are confident in failure. Most people say, this is not going to work out, it's going to fail. And that's their confidence. They're confident about it. So was Philip. This won't work. Can't happen. And he's confident about it. He's strong on it. Andrew shows up, and he's going to second the motion. And he did. You remember Peter. Peter thought he trusted God. He thought he'd never deny Christ. And all of a sudden, his nest got a little stirred. A little servant girl pops up with a little question. And then he goes to denying it. Israel thought they trusted God. Then he allowed them to hunger. Here comes all the murmuring and complaining. Philip thought he understood how to be a good disciple. You know, all of these people are flocking to them. At this time, they were. Then all of a sudden, these 5,000 show up, and they're not just there to hear something. They're there and they're hungry. Different tests, but the same Father. The Father knew what each son trusted in. And so he stirred the nest a little, make it a little uncomfortable. He's not asking what you're afraid of. He's asking what you're trusting. Usually we're trusting in self, what we can do, what we could come up with. Moses says that eagle fluttered over her young. The mother doesn't just stir that nest and then disappear. She remains above the young chicks. She's watching them and guarding them while she's making them uncomfortable. Just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean you did something wrong. Those eaglets did nothing wrong. Mama's been bringing them the food. Mama brought them into the world. Usually, what happens is we start looking at the nest getting stirred up, and we say, as though we're one of the little eaglets in the nest, to the next eaglet, "You did something wrong because your side of the nest is all messed up." That's not necessarily so. Here, the eagle is messing the nest up, and it's all of them that are going to get affected eventually, and it's God working. He says in Isaiah 41, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God." That is, he's going to be there. He says in John, "I'll never leave thee nor forsake thee." So he's there. Just because trouble showed up didn't mean trouble suddenly was bigger than God. We start thinking trouble has cast a shadow that's so huge that trouble must be bigger than God, but that's wrong. In Psalm 23:4, he said this, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." When the valley of the shadow of death shows up, you no doubt it's going to be uncomfortable. That's not going to be something you choose to walk through on a stroll. He says God's with him, and that's where he is. God doesn't promise to eliminate all valleys. Wish he did, but he doesn't. He promises his presence in the midst of them. And that's exactly what that eagle's been doing. She never loses sight of her little eaglets. She stirred up that nest. And that's what God does. He stirs up our little nest the second we start feeling like we're comfortable. Comfort is temporary. That's not the point of us being here. That is the point that teenagers have. Teenagers think they're after some elusive form of happiness and comfort. What they don't realize is that's ever changing, and that's not the point you're here for. Well, we'll see. I've only got one point left, but it's going to be longer. This one's a long point. So we'll pick that up. Maybe we'll do a double header next week and